Not too long ago, I got my hands on a game called Aeron. Aeron is a precision platformer. If you're familiar with Super Meat Boy, then you have some idea of the genre. These are platformers which require careful timing, memorization, and, in general, skills with which to pay the bills. While I had a bit of fun with Aeron, unfortunately the game is critically flawed. Now why is that, you might ask? Aeron is certainly a challenging game, it's very difficult, and isn't that what players want out of precision platformers? Well, while those sorts of players do want challenge, it's not the sort of challenge that Aeron offers. Before we get around to explaining how Aeron is flawed, let's first talk about what makes challenging games fun. Let's use Super Meat Boy as our whipping meat boy. You know, I don't really like the term whipping boy, but, well, yeah. In order to play a level in Super Meat Boy effectively, you need to first learn what the hazards are in the levels. There could be giant saws, or giant death robots, or deadly squirrels. The game is fraught with danger. Once you know what you're up against, then it's a matter of using careful timing in order to survive. Super Meat Boy is a game of pure skill. If you make a mistake, it's totally your fault. It's obvious to see where you went wrong, and it's also somewhat obvious to figure out how you can fix it. Now, compare that with Aeron. Conceptually speaking, Aeron's gameplay sounds really cool. In Aeron, you have to jump back and forth between dimensions in order to reach platforms that may exist in one dimension, but that may not exist in the other. It's not a completely original idea for a platformer. In fact, the game Shattered Soul did this on the 3DS pretty well, but I have to say that I'm partial to Aeron's aesthetic. It's a little bit reminiscent of Titan Souls. But that's the basic premise of the game. Hopping on platforms, shifting between dimensions, and trying not to die. So why does Aeron fail where Super Meat Boy succeeded? To put it bluntly, Aeron lacks consistency. In Super Meat Boy, if you press a button to jump, your character jumps. If you press a button to go forward, your little meathead will go forward. In Aeron, however, sometimes the controls just don't react. This seems to be more on account of a glitch than an intentional gameplay decision, and it's really not fun to work with. For instance, if you hit the Shift key to shift between dimensions, sometimes you'll be able to shift, but you'll be stuck in that dimension. The only way to escape this dimension is by the sweet release of death. Other times, the controls seem to lag or don't respond quite right. So these errors in the game certainly add on challenge, but it's the wrong kind of challenge. Unlike in Super Meat Boy, where you just have to be super careful about what you do, in Aeron, you might die and it won't be any of your fault. Now, I know what you might be thinking at this point. Hold up, does this mean that roguelikes are actually bad games? As a big fan of FTL, Faster Than Light, and other roguelites, if you will, no, I don't think that roguelikes are bad games because you can die at random. After all, dying at random in FTL kind of makes sense, both in the context of the game's mechanics, as well as in the context of the game's universe. In FTL, lots of things are randomized. You can never really be sure what exactly you're going to run into. FTL calls on players to think up new strategies on the fly, and to have a dynamic way of playing the game, and essentially being willing to bend over backwards in order to avoid death. FTL's a roguelike, or a roguelite. However, Aeron is supposed to be a precision platformer. When you die, it's supposed to be you that made the mistake, not the game. You can't learn and perfect a level in a precision platformer if there's no guarantee that your controls aren't going to be the same next time you play the game. Of course, that's not to discourage anybody from trying to develop a precision platformer with randomly generated levels. In fact, I like the idea of a precision platformer with levels that are different every time. It could be a really interesting test of skill, so long as the mechanics and controls aren't randomized. So in case you missed the concept altogether, it's okay to frustrate players so long as you're frustrating players with their own lack of skill, rather than by changing things around in the game when things are not supposed to be changed. Inconsistency makes games unfun. So, what do you think about Aeron? Are you prepared to be challenged by it in all the wrong ways? Well, good news, we're giving away a few copies. All you have to do is tweet us at BlackmanandRobin and tell us what game has frustrated you the most over the years. If we like your tweet, we just might feature it on the next episode of Game News Update, and if we do that, we'll be sure to shoot you a Steam key for Aeron.